Sawabona family, in the classroom today, we are celebrating liberation. This is the week of Juneteenth, and we are very excited about it.
Yes, Freedom Day, right? Celebrated in the Black community for years and years and years and years. And if you don't know the history of Juneteenth, we'll talk about it a little bit more. But our special guest today is our incoming, actually already sworn in, AXA President, Dr. Daryl Camp. So stay tuned because the Critically Conscious Classroom is next.
Microphone check 1 2 1 2. Welcome to the Critically Conscious Classroom, reporting to you live from me walking Nisanan unceded territory here in Sacramento, California, at the AXA corporate offices. I am Anthony Robinson, the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as well as one of your co-hosts.
And I am your other co-host, Dr. Tracy Noriega, Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Professional Learning Services. It's really good to be with all of you today on a different day. And there is a reason why we moved it to today, because we're on holiday. On Thursday. As we said, it's Juneteenth. Shout out to Neri for joining us, the first one.
Yes, big shout out to Neri.
Right, y'all, if you need to, we'd love to see your comments pop up in the chat. You have to log on to YouTube to do that, but we would love to see it.
Yes. And just real quick, so for those of you all who don't know, Juneteenth is a holiday that we celebrate. So Juneteenth represents June 19th, 1865. So that is the day where the last enslaved Black folks in the state of Texas were notified that they were no longer enslaved and that they were free in this country. And I won't dive into why I use my quote fingers, but we celebrate this. This is something that's been celebrated in the Black community for well over 100 years. So really excited to be celebrating that with my family this year. And for those of you all who are celebrating, even if you haven't celebrated in the past, this is something that definitely needs to be recognized beyond the pandemic, right? Because we saw that it was made a federal holiday, but everyone is not off work to celebrate. So one of the things that we fight for on the Critically Conscious Classroom is liberation and freedom for all. So we're definitely going to be celebrating Juneteenth on this Thursday. I want to make one quick shout out too. So as Dr. Noriega mentioned, we do have our guest, Dr. Daryl Camp, coming on. And I have on my Morehouse College hat. That's my alma mater, his alma mater as well. But one of the reasons why I wore this hat is birthed out of what we got from Juneteenth. We also got Morehouse College, which was founded a little less than 2 years later in 1867, actually on what we know as Valentine's Day. So this hat is special beyond it being our alma maters, but also what it represents, not only for Black folks, but in American history. So I'm really excited about bringing Dr. Camp on.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and bring Dr. Camp on. But as we do, we give some flowers.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I know we've talked before about, right, this aspect of liberation. It's an ongoing theme. And one of the ways I think about liberation is this ability to be our most authentic selves, right? Whether it's, obviously at home is one, amongst your friends or particular groups of friends. You might have a particular, I guess, personality that comes up. But the question is always like, how are we most free? How are we most authentic at our places of work? So some of you know my career trajectory. I was in New Haven Unified for 27 years, and then I had this opportunity to become Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services in San Lorenzo Unified, working with Dr. Daryl Camp.
Yes.
And we actually were in the same district before in New Haven Unified, though we didn't know each other at the time. I was teaching bilingual kindergarten and first grade at the elementary school, and then Dr. Camp was at James Logan High School. But our paths didn't cross until actually AXA, I think. But going back to this idea of being able to be your most authentic self, I just definitely want to thank Dr. Camp for setting the conditions for me to be my most authentic self as an assistant superintendent, right? And I'm already steeped in some really great, strong racial equity work. I was able to help lead that in San Lorenzo Unified, and I know that that's work that continues. So shout out, Dr. Camp. And now you get to be AXA president. And that's what we're going to talk about. What to expect this year under Dr. Camp's presidency.
Is your tech working, my brother? That's what.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Even 5 minutes before this, but I think it's good right now.
I just had to do a mic check on you. So glad to have you with us, Dr. Camp.
I'm happy to be here.
As Dr. Noriega said, we always start out with flowers, and I know for our previous 7 episodes, Dr. Noriega has always had a story that she shares. So I don't know if you want to share anything beyond that now that he's here, or if you're ready for me to drop this question on him to see if he's ready.
Oh, I got stuff to share. I don't know if that's for public consumption.
Yeah, we can't go too far because Dr. Noriega knows some people I used to hang around with when I was teaching, when I was young and naive and easily led. So
go ahead.
Well, I'll start us here with my micro story. So Dr. Camp and I met a little over a year ago. As I mentioned, we're both Morehouse men. This is my Morehouse brother, but we hadn't crossed paths. So I had the great fortune of having Dr. Camp interview me for my second interview for this role. And I had no idea he was a Morehouse graduate. He never mentioned it, but in my final interview, he busted in the midst of the interview and started asking me all these questions about Morehouse. It didn't throw me off. It didn't shake me. I appreciated it. But now it's time to return the favor. So hopefully you can hear me very clearly, sir. So
I think it's breaking up.
All right. Well, we gotta fix that. So if I need to repeat myself, I will, and then we'll jump into our actual questions. So Dr. Camp, as a Morehouse man of almost 35 years, there's part of our tradition, and part of our tradition is holding hands and singing our song. So Dr. Camp, if I was to say this to you, how would you finish this sentence? Holy Spirit, make us steadfast, honest, true to old Morehouse
and her ideals, and in all things that we do.
Yes, sir. You are a true Morehouse man. So thank you very much. I knew you were anyway.
Oh, yeah. I could sing the whole song. I love that song. That's my power song.
Love it. I love it too, my friend. So let me jump into our first question. So Dr. Camp, your platform as an AXA president centers on leading loudly. What does that look like in practice, especially when advocating for equity in politically charged environments?
Yeah, like Dr. Noriega mentioned, I've had the benefit of serving as superintendent in the San Lorenzo Unified School District for the last 6 years, and happy that Dr. Noriega was a part of that journey for about 3 of those years thus far, Dr. Noriega. And for in San Lorenzo, we've out of all the districts I've served in, I would say San Lorenzo is the one that's closest to allowing me to be as authentic as I can be. But I also say this, I'm still probably holding back. I'm probably around 60%. But in many environments, it's not safe in order to lead in an authentic way. And I say safe, meaning there'll probably be some professional harm that gets done to you if you're leading authentically. So I've always been one to serve very judiciously and strategically in the multiple roles that I've had through in this educational journey. So leading loudly to me is, once again, it's something that I'm advocating for as president of AXA, because there's certain things that happen and certain things that I think we're aware of, I'm going to say at the statewide and national level, that we can't afford to be silent. that does not mean we're going to be foolish. Because if you're foolish, I don't think that benefits the organizations that we work for and with, including AXA. So what I'm advocating for is to be strategic in the leadership, but don't be silent. That's the one option. I know one of our fellow Morehouse men, who's often quoted, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He made a quoted reference to that, right? That it's not the what your enemies say that worries you. It's more the silence of your allies, and I think about that. So I think when we see that students are being attacked, whether that be our students that come from immigrant families or who may be immigrants themselves, that means when we have students that are students and families, candidly, that are identify as having something other than a cisgender identity or orientation, then I think it behooves us all to speak up in such a way that's strategic and purposeful. I think it gives permission within our organizations, our school districts, and our organizations to have others speak up as well, as long as we're doing so.
So you talked about speaking up. You talked about not being silent, right? And the theme for this coming leadership summit is lead loudly, share stories, right, and build bridges. So that also speaks to modeling courageous leadership. So what does that look like? How do you model courageous leadership for your staff, students, community, in this time of political or cultural tension, and now for all of the administrators in AXA and beyond?
Yeah, courageous leadership, to me, once again, it's right in line with recognizing that there's a lot of risk when you decide to step into leadership positions. And I'm thankful that I'm in this leadership position. I'm thankful that you're in your leadership position. And I think it's kind of redundant. A leader has to take a risk. In San Lorenzo, we pride ourselves on disrupting the status quo. And it's not just to be disruptive, but it's recognizing that the status quo is not working for too many students. So when you decide to step into a leadership role in any district, but particularly in San Lorenzo, and I would say in AXA too, it's all for this idea that we need to make changes. We need to disrupt the status quo because that's better for more students. Now, one of those challenges is in being courageous is recognizing that when you're disrupting the status quo, you're going to make some people unhappy. And with that unhappiness, you will be attacked. However, for me, I'm sort of accepting of that right now, that, being attacked is something that I signed up for. I always tell myself and those within my organization, at some point, we all said yes or we all applied, right? Mm-hmm. And with that goes this expectation that you're going to try to make changes that are better for students. As leaders, I think one of the greatest values that we have to organizations is we have the power to bring together people with diverse thoughts and ideas. And I think you need to utilize that power, if you will, of convening people with diverse ideas and thoughts to the benefit of our organization. I truly believe that the best outcomes and solutions for the most complex problems are generated when we have diverse opinions and thoughts.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Camp, you talked about courageous leadership. You talked about having people with diverse backgrounds and mindsets and opinions, right? So in order to be a courageous leader, you obviously can't do it in isolation. That means that you have to make strong connections. So what does it mean for you in this moment to make strong connections and also to use that as leverage to bridge communities that are feeling increasingly isolated or targeted?
Yeah, this is a kind of a nuanced answer for me. And like I shared at the Leadership Assembly about a month ago, I benefited from being in very diverse backgrounds, very diverse places, traveling around the world. And with all of those experiences, and also growing up in Oakland, which is a very diverse city, I've learned that there are many different perspectives and ideas, that one way may not be the best way. And that's important to recognize. The other experience I want to just kind of highlight is I've had the benefit of serving now for 6 years as a superintendent in San Lorenzo, but what preceded that was an experience of serving for 8 years and 7 as a superintendent in a town called Riverbank, right in the Modesto area in Central Valley. I will acknowledge, growing up in the Bay Area, I had significant blind spots. Obviously, the Bay Area leans significantly left if you look at it from a political standpoint. I think about 70% of the residents in Alameda County are probably going to vote Democratic when it comes to presidential elections. That's only topped by, I think, San Francisco, where about 80% of the populace are going to vote Democratic. But then in Riverbank, I knew in Stanislaus County, about 45% of the population would vote Democratic. So I didn't even know that part existed when I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm thankful for that experience because unlike some, I won't say many, I think we probably all have blind spots. And it's easier to have blind spots the more isolated you are. We have systems that are working against us that actually feed into our blind spots. Many of us choose to live in communities that are somewhat segregated. And you look at that with the patterns of who's living, when you look at it by racial demographics in different areas. And even if you further zoom in on our schools, many of our schools are segregated. Likewise, if you look at the geography of our state, I would say that in the Bay Area, if I tend to lean on a more conservative side of things, I may not feel like my voice can be heard because they will be drowned out, and some would say not valued by a population that's more progressive or Democratic leaning. But likewise, if I'm in the Central Valley, you wonder about some of your viewpoints if you lean on the progressive side of things. What I learned as a superintendent, though, is when you bring people to the table and you give them a spot and you make them feel comfortable enough to share their views, I think when it comes to fighting for students, we're going to find more commonalities than differences. So that the differences are strong, they're real, and I think we need to lean into them. That's the courageous part. The easier thing to do is to ignore, to not invite diverse people to the table. But I think if we're going to come up with the best outcome, if we're going to come up with the best outcome for kids, that we need to entertain all viewpoints. I'm convinced that when I travel up and down the state in this role in AXA and from talking to people, that if I lean on the Republican side of things or conservative side of things in California, I probably do feel isolated in certain ways, especially when you look at our 2/3 led Democratic legislature up in Sacramento. And the governor, the Republicans probably feel like they don't have a voice. Yet, I don't want to separate it into Republican and Democrat because I see some things that, if it were my vote on both sides, I would be dissatisfied with. And once again, I'm really critical of the Democrats in Sacramento because they have the power. They have the 2/3, and in terms of both the Senate and the Assembly. Likewise, I'm going to fight against some things that are nationally that are happening from the federal administration that just simply aren't good for kids. So as this role in AXA president, I can't promise that I'm not going to make people upset. What I can promise you is that I'm going to work as hard as I can and try to invite diverse perspectives into the room, because I think that that's how we're going to get the best outcome for the systems in which we lead. By the way, just one other thing I want to add to it, I cut off too. That's not just when you look at it from a political standpoint. The most difficult area of diversity to actually address is probably around race. We all avoid that because it's difficult to talk about. So I think we need to invite racialized conversations into the room because if we can talk about race, we can talk about any other differences of opinion. So I invite people to lean into and not shy away from conversations where the race is obvious. You talk to kids and they're really good at it, but us as adults, we're not. Kids will point out, hey, why haven't we ever had a black teacher at this school, right? They're really good about that. But as adults, you can go through months and months and years without actually saying that, right?
I had a question.
Uh-oh.
Now,
Hopefully,
now I
yeah.
got to morph it a little bit.
You
So
gonna
you-
ask me a Morehouse question?
No,
Okay,
I
thank
can't
you.
ask you a Morehouse question. That's not my alma mater, but we do share an alma mater, Dr. Camp.
Stingers up.
Stingers up, Sacramento. Okay, so you talked about elected officials. You talked about our legislators, right? Partisan, what people could call, partisan issues or what have you. And I think that there is definitely an opportunity for us to come together because it's what's good for kids, even though I think there are differences in what people think are good for kids. And then you brought in this aspect about talking about race, right? Racializing everything. And I know that in San Lorenzo, that was a huge part of our work. Racializing every conversation, making it very uncomfortable, right? Especially for folks that don't talk about race or don't include race in their conversations on a daily basis. In my family, I think every conversation includes race, but that is not the same for other families, right? And
We must have the same family, Dr. Noriega.
we still family, Dr. Camp.
Yes.
So when it comes to like this idea of making decisions that's best for kids, and whether it's through policies and practices at a school site, in a school district, or even at a statewide level, from what you've seen in your role as a superintendent and what you've seen being part of, statewide AXA for a number of years and going into this presidency of yours, how do you think that we can better come together? Because we're coming on an SPI election, we're coming on, a gubernatorial election. As you said, the Democrats control the House, but there's lots of infighting over there too. And maybe I don't think this is just a lunch break conversations, because again, you brought this in, right? Like we have to talk about the thing that nobody likes to talk about. But the more that we talk about it, the more that it gets more comfortable, if you will, the more that we can address it. And honestly, the more that we can dismantle this aspect of racism.
Yeah, I truly believe that if you're comfortable, you're probably not leaning in far enough. That we need people in our system that are comfortable at being uncomfortable. So, as school administrators or anybody that, more than school administrators, but definitely administrators, I encourage administrators to lean into uh, convening people of diverse viewpoints and backgrounds, and recognizing too that means you're going to have to move outside of your comfort zone. We kind of have built into life this whole thing that's been what's it? The technology that's out there that encourages us to stay in our own ecosystem. The algorithm feeds you what you want to hear, and yet there's a lack of diversity that's being fed into your feeds. If you look at it from a technological and algorithmic standpoint, so recognizing that sometimes you got to seek opportunities to put yourself in a diverse place that gets outside of your comfort zone. I chose to do that, and I give a lot of kudos to my family also. They didn't choose, but they did come with me when I decided to serve as an assistant superintendent in Riverbank. And we knew that we were a fish out the water there. We were African Americans represented 1% of the population. But I know I learned a lot there too. I learned that I could sit down with people. In fact, Christian Olsen at the time was the leader of the Republican Party in California. She lived right in our community. But I learned if I'm going to try to serve my community, I need to sit down and talk to Christian Olsen. It just made sense to do so. I think when I look at it as a superintendent, we were committed to having study sessions where board members with different political perspectives can sit down and talk about Riverbank and what we could do in order to create a better educational system for Riverbank. So I think it's just important to lean into. For some of us, that's a little bit easier to do than others. Like if you're, what would that look like? If you're a person of faith, maybe go visit another house of worship that's dramatically different than your house of worship. Uh, Mr. Robinson, you might. When I was in Morehouse, I remember I went to a Buddhist place once just to get the experience, right? In deciding to live in Mexico for a couple months, and my family spent the whole year down there. That's putting us in situations that we are clearly the fish out of water, but that's, I think you developed too. I learned while down in Mexico that there's a clear difference between standard of living and quality of life. And that's something I probably would not have thought about before if it weren't for that experience. And I could go to different parts of the world too, where you just learn different things. Mom and I going to the Dakar, Senegal, I remember, and we were walking at this pace that that was applicable for the Bay Area, and we recognized we were the only one moving at that pace. So we learned how to just be calm, cool, and that laid back walk that you see among African Americans sometimes. I know where that came from after the experience at Dakar, Senegal. It made sense. You don't move fast when it's hot, right? Just some thoughts.
Now, Dr. Camp, you talked to us about a lot of things, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you or allow you to talk to us about your legacy, right? So we've talked about your legacy as a Morehouse man, your legacy as an educator, as a superintendent, all of the great things that you've done. But now as our incoming president, you've already been sworn in. My question for you is, how do you envision creating a legacy of inclusive leadership despite all of the things that you've already talked about, the external forces, the things that are pushing against us? How do you intend to do that? And I know we've talked a bit about your platform, and obviously you've talked about this too, but over the course of this next year, how do you plan to set that firm ground for your work and also the legacy that you'll leave as our AXA president?
It's great question, and I would be lying to you if I said I've completely figured this out. I will say this: I really give my brother Rafael Plasencia, AXA's current president, and obviously we're in transition. I give him a lot of credit and kudos for being consistent with the message about taking care of each other. I think that resonated with AXA and will be his legacy. I think it's going to last for years. And as we get into my year, I'm still trying to figure this out. And it'll probably be stronger at the end of the presidency than the first part of this presidency. But the things that I'm thinking about right now is, yes, we need to bring people together of diverse thoughts. The root of forming connections is bringing people together and giving an opportunity for people to share their stories. When you share your stories, and I know that's kind of the root of like ethnic studies, we have to share our stories and begin to build on and understand each other's backgrounds as a way of forming relationships so we can do great work together. So I really want, just like the leadership summits themes and the many themes there about sharing your stories is the way we're going to build bridges, and that will allow us to have the foundation in order to share our stories loudly in all aspects of AXA. When you think about our strategic plan, I think about it from a sustainability and development of the organization standpoint. Well, we have to bring people into AXA and they have to figure out the value of AXA. And part of that is finding out how your job can be benefited from your involvement in AXA. When I think about membership development and support, that's critical also. We as AXA have to figure out how we're going to support all of our members, and it's difficult. I know Dr. Noriega has that awesome task, but she has an awesome team also that she's working with in order to make sure our professional learning opportunities are trying to meet the needs of everybody. And it's very, very difficult, but it's also our key. It feeds right into the organizational sustainability and development. And then from an advocacy and influence standpoint, that other pillar that's in our strategic plan, sharing our stories. With all due respect to me, I can sometimes talk to people in Sacramento or DC, but when they hear from a parent or a student, it could have, or principal, it might actually have greater value because it's perceived as being more real than just the gibberish that comes out of the superintendent's mouth. But I can influence that, right? I can sometimes work in order to help to provide a stage for people to be able to share the stories, or I can retell the stories that I get from my community. So I think at the end of the day, I don't know what people are going to say about my legacy. They'll probably just say the bow tie guy. But I hope it will be more substantial than just what I wear, but the things that I do to be consequential for our students. Anthony, I can't go back to Morehouse unless I'm a consequence to my community, and that means we don't want to hear Morehouse what you are, lawyer, doctor, politician. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how are you contributing to your community.
Absolutely.
And you see that in countless examples of, I'm sure, thousands of people who have graduated Morehouse. And I do hold myself up to that same standard. That's the crown I want to grow into when it's all said and done.
I think that's a huge responsibility, not just for Morehousemen, but for everyone, right? This aspect of making sure that you are of consequence, making sure that you are serving your community. And Dr. Camp, that was part of your speech at Leadership Assembly, was about servant leadership.
It's a curse, and I'm so grateful to be able to be in a position where I can, be of consequence as well. But it is a burden. Don't get me wrong. I'm serious. You don't go on that campus unless you can talk about what you're doing for your community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could remember the author of this quote, but it was something to the effect of how the community chooses you as a leader, right? So we could have titles, we can be elected to office, but if the community doesn't choose you as a leader, then where do you go from there? So I think that part of you being elected, right, is just that, Dr. Camp. You're elected as AXA president. You're doing amazing things for the San Lorenzo community and beyond. And I think that lifting up just the idea of being able to share stories is actually really important, because, like you said, especially in ethnic studies, right? We have ethnic studies because all of these stories that weren't ever told or weren't written down and put in a textbook, right? Those are the stories that we need to be able to lift up, because they're true, right? They're just as true as maybe, or I don't know if everything in textbook is absolutely true.
Well, I'm probably going to get in trouble when I say this, but I just, this is the critically conscious classroom.
There is.
And I think that's the best way of being educated, of being in an environment where we can critically talk about issues and perspectives. I think we're doing a disservice to students if we can't talk about different viewpoints and perspectives with the Holocaust, or the current situation in Gaza and Palestine right now, and Israel. And let's just have a conversation. That's what makes me sort of upset with our current Democratic legislature. I'm looking at votes, and it's unanimous. And I think we're trying to squash having a critical conversation about things that are happening now and in the past. And I think we do a disservice to our students when we do that. And I see that on both sides of the aisle. And I would say, from a pedagogical standpoint and a motivational standpoint for our kids, that's not the best move for our students.
Yes. And to Lester Powell's comment, right? Safe spaces. And I'm going to add brave spaces.
Yeah.
Brave spaces. And this is what happens in the classroom. You build, you create community, you have opportunities for that discourse and dialogue that gets, the babies thinking. And this is where civic engagement happens. So shout out to all the educators that are creating conditions for that. Right. And yes, Alita Rose, thank you. You're right. Healing spaces. Ethnic studies is a healing space. So let's include that as well. Well, what else are we going to get into? I
probably already said too much. So there are a couple comments in the chat, but I see in USD we have unassigned days, but they are Jewish holidays, and we take time to teach those holidays so the community knows it's not just a day off. You Lester, you made my kids got upset with me because during the MLK holiday in January, we would always sit down and really focus on MLK and his sayings and his speeches. Kids thought it was a day off, but I agree. Those are opportunities in order to learn more. You get a day off so you can delve more into and recognize a historical perspective. So my kids hated me for it though. Mm-hmm.
I have one final question for you, Dr. Camp, because I know we're running low on time. So we've talked quite a bit about policymakers. So here's my question for you. If you could sit in a room with all the folks that you can imagine, right? And you could deliver one message directly to them, policymakers specifically, about the impacts of their mandates on the lives of real students and real families, what would you say to them?
Wow, that wasn't on the script. Let's see.
There's no script, brother.
No, I love it. That's what happens in a classroom, though, right? You lead to where you are at the time.
We're in class.
That's where the learning takes place because you're more likely to be meeting the learner where they are. What my message to lawmakers would be, and I actually seek this out. I want to see. We're so polarized right now with the D and the R thing. I want to see the actual circumstances and bills where a lawmaker goes against the wishes of their party. So my message would be: show me your courageous receipts, and your courageous receipts will be votes that you've taken on matters that are different than the majority of your party. That's what I want to see. That to me is courage. You might be to your political downfall, but also for me, it says something about your courage level. I don't think they're in this polarized world that we're in right now, and part of it is because of this gerrymandering and the media cycle where politicians will be attacked if they take and that financially supported. I realize the tendency is to go along to get along, and I would also says to me, I like a lawmaker that has some courage, even if it's something I disagree with. I want you to have courage in order to go in a direction that's different than your party. So I know Gavin Newsom took a lot of heat for his podcast and remarks that he made and the guests that he's had on his podcast. I commend him for it. I said I think we need to lean in and sometimes your comments, your thoughts aren't going to be popular. So as AXA president, here what I can guarantee you, please share with me your thoughts. We might disagree. That's okay. And I can still hug you and love you and appreciate the disagreement, because I'm convinced that through those disagreements, through us being uncomfortable, we're going to come up with better outcomes for the communities in which we serve. And I would send that same message to member of the federal and the state legislature.
I love that, Dr. Camp. That aspect of courageous receipts, that might be a phrase we will be using this year. Yeah. And what that brings to mind about courageous receipts, and you said maybe going against your party lines, is that maybe the right thing to do is really what your community voted you in to do, right? And I think that's sometimes what's missing. You have this whole community that chose you, that elected you, and you're not necessarily representing them in the way they want to be represented. So
and it's difficult. I would say, because like I said, even in a Bay Area community, I know 70% of Alameda County is probably going to vote Democratic, but the 30% would feel like they're not being heard in that case. And you could flip flop that if you go to the northern part of the state or the Central Valley. So I think it is hard, but as long as you can, take a position and articulate your position and it has some rationale, I would say let's stay engaged. We're not always going to agree. Somebody said, well, goodness, I made this comment as some board members and community members once. I said, superintendent would be easy if everybody would just do what I say. But there's no disagreement. Things are easy, but when you have to work in the legislative space and the compromise space, you probably get the better outcomes. Because I know, even though if everybody did what I said, it probably would not be the best way of going about it for our community. There's benefit of engaging everybody. So another controversial, that's a note to President. Okay, it's harder, but it's probably better in the long run if you engage more people in the conversation and the decision-making process. It's slower and it's more difficult, but you probably get better outcomes.
Absolutely.
Yep. And Dr. Camp, like all great things, we got to bring this thing to an end. This has been a fruitful conversation. We really appreciate you. I know you were going to say something, but let me say this. So I do want to end this conversation in the same way that we began, with flowers. And you know this, but I'm sharing it for the people. At Morehouse College, we talk about Mother Morehouse and the fact that she holds a crown above our heads. And as we matriculate through the college, and even after we graduate, our goal is to grow big enough, grow tall enough to reach that crown. And I'll tell you this, sir, you ain't there yet, but you are almost there. You are almost there. No, because it's a life's journey, right? And you know that.
Yeah.
But you are almost there. So I do want to say, as a younger Morehouse man, you are definitely a role model. You are the epitome of what they tell us when we enter Morehouse College, and I appreciate you. And I'm sure that I speak on behalf of everyone watching this, and even folks that don't have the chance to watch it. You are doing some great work, and you are appreciated.
I'll just say thank you, and thanks for having me on the Courageous Conscious Classroom. I'm just so appreciative of the work that you're doing. Well, did I say courageous? Now I'm switching
Critically conscious.
Critically Conscious Classroom. Yeah, so thank you, Mr. the future Dr. Robinson, and thanks, Dr. Noriega. I'm just so happy that you're in the position that you're in, and we can continue to work together in this space, different than San Lorenzo space, but I'm so appreciative for you two and starting this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for joining us.
All right, Dr. Noriega, we gotta close it out. So I will throw it to you because I know we have Summer Leadership Institute coming up. I don't know if folks can still register. You'll have to let us know.
Yes, we still would love to have you at Summer Leadership Institute. So if you just got hired on, or even if you're an aspiring administrator, we'll be at the University of Laverne next week. It's going to be an amazing time. I'm looking forward to seeing all the folks and seeing our presenters as well, and our team leaders. The other thing that's coming up is Women in School Leadership Forum. That's coming up in September. There's a bunch of call for proposals open for a number of our conferences. So please check that out on our AXA website. And of course, our Leadership Summit, November 6th through 8th in San Francisco. The theme is, as we talked about, lead loudly, sharing stories, and building bridges. We'd love to see you there. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I rescheduled because Juneteenth is a holiday.
Yeah, so let me say this too before we close. I do want to give a fat shout out to everyone in the room today, everyone in classroom with us. Shout out to Neri, shout out to Alita, shout out to Lester, shout out to Renee. I think that's all I see in the chat. I do want to say this. We've talked for the last 7 episodes, previous episodes, about rest, and we're going to take some. So this is our summer break. This is our pause. We are ending season 1 of the Critically Conscious Classroom, and we will be back in about mid-August. One important thing that's going to be happening is Dr. Noriega and my man, Renee. I hope, Renee, if you're still here, congratulations to you all. They're going to become grandparents in the next little over a month. August 1st is the due date, right?
August 1st is the due date, but you never know. So thank you. Yes, the next chapter in our lives, grandparent duty. And belated Happy Father's Day to you, Anthony, and the rest of our folks out there who are fathers, father figures. Yes. I got to shout out the single moms. If you've ever been a single mom, like myself at one point, then you get some kudos too.
Yes. Congratulations. And then finally, before I close us out, I do want to highlight this comment from Lester, and then that's how I'll close us out. Lester says, in LAUSD, we have unassigned days, but they are Jewish holidays, and we take the time to teach these holidays so the community knows it's not just a day off. With that same spirit, please approach Juneteenth. It's not just another day off. So I know most of us are out of school now, but we still have access to people. Please share whatever information you have about Juneteenth with folks. There are books, and we need to create a better resource library as your diversity, equity, and inclusion department. So we'll be working on that as well. We hope you all have a great, restful summer, and we will see you all back in about 6 or 7 weeks or so. But don't fret. All 8 episodes of the Critically Conscious Classroom are available to you on demand via the AXA YouTube page. So please watch it. Please share it. Please watch it again and share it again. So again, have a great summer, and we'll see you on the other side. Peace.
Peace.